it was a big discussion regarding what happened in the Barbie premiere. It wasn't a press screening, obviously, because they didn't invite any press. They did a premiere in London, and for the first time in the history of the Critics Society, they didn't invite a single member of our federation, and they just invited influencers, and they gave them some gimmicks or gifts, and they wrote on it, "We are waiting for your positive feedback." Critics are always risk. You can invite them, you can treat them, and they will write negatively about your film. But so they decided only to invite people who can be writing exclusively positively about the film.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Kawadis. My name is Mikey Mahenna. Usually on Kawadis, we have filmmakers, we have actors. We don't always have an opportunity to have film critics on the series. So today's our lucky day. We have Ahmed Shawky, who is a film critic and is the president of FIPRESCI, which I'll get him to explain in a little bit. But essentially, it's a syndicate or a organization celebrating film and film criticism. Ahmed, welcome to the series.
Thank you, Mikey. How are you?
I'm good. So real quick, let's just kind of define like the basics. What does a film critic do in the Arab world? And no, what is the job of a film critic in the Arab world?
Question easy to answer, but I would say it's the same mission that we carry, not only in the Arab world, everywhere else. Maybe we need it more here in the region, but generally, a film critic is trying to become a mediator between art and people, consumers, audience. I always like to define a film critic as an experienced audience. He's or she is someone who loves the field that he works in. In my case, it's film, cinema. He acquires experience through years, through watching films, reading about them, getting into different discussions, and he or she can justify the opinion. So you give an opinion about the art, about the film, and you justify it and try to convince people of your opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so for those of us who grew up in the region, Egypt is obviously like the home of Arab cinema. And some might argue that this is where cinema more broadly started, if you go back to Napoleon times. But what drew you into film, cinema? Was it Hollywood movies? Was it Egyptian film? Was it Italian? What sort of got you obsessed?
I think it's a mix of everything, but remembering my childhood, I was raised in a city called Tanta, which is the third or fourth city in Egypt. It's exactly in the midway between Cairo and Alexandria. So it doesn't have all the options that used to be here in the capital in Cairo. So during my childhood, what was available was the films that are in the local cinemas. We had 2 or 3 cinemas in the whole city. The films that are being screened on television, which was only the Egyptian television, 2 or 3 channels, and the video clubs, of course, which shaped the taste of most of our generation. I assume we are not that far in age. So when I tried to recall what was there, it was mainly Egyptian and American films. Maybe in every 1 week, an Egyptian television show called Panorama Francesa screens a film or a part of a film, of a French film or something like this. But generally, I grew up until a certain point where I discovered internet, and I realized that you can even download films or buy films. But until this point of my life, until I became 16 or 17, I think 99% of my watching were Egyptian and American cinema, and I think I owe a lot to them, because when you start realizing that there are different narratives, different ways of doing films, when you realize that there is someone called Federico Fellini or Akira Kurosawa or Jean-Luc Godard or whatever, you start feel a sort of superiority towards films that you watched when you was young, and you start to be picky or a bit snob towards Egyptian or American films. But with age and with getting to know more about the history and discovering more films that maybe you were not aware of watching the commercial titles around you, you realize how unique is the what we call a mainstream cinema. Like now, I'm 40 years old plus, and I think that without Hollywood cinema, without Egyptian mainstream cinema, maybe I would have been still working as a pharmacist because I was graduated to be a pharmacist. So yeah, I think that shaped my passion to cinema. What was there in the theaters and in the video clubs mainly. But with internet, everything became different.
But
Everything
did you
in my
have,
personal life and in my understanding of cinema.
but did you have like a moment where you saw one film that you're like, oh, wait a second. There is a craft here that's worth exploring. Like it's not just revealing a plot. There is craft. That's that. And did you feel a taste actually being sort of like emerging? Were you reading critics? Were you reading like copied versions of Empire magazine and copied versions of like Premiere? Like what were you reading?
Um, I envy people who has this moment in their life, who can really recall a moment. I have a book that was a continuous discussion between me and Egyptian director Dawood Abdel Sayed, and he recalled this moment when he was invited to go to a film set with a friend who works in the industry, and he just watched how they shoot the films, and he realized that he would love to become a filmmaker. And also he remembers watching Black Orpheus and how did it shape his understanding. But for me, not. No, I don't think I have a certain moment of my memory that made me think that I should do so. But I was reading since I was 6 or 7 years old. I was reading everything around me. I started reading. I stopped reading comic and went to youth literature when I was 9 years old. I was like reading everything I can see, and mainly the criticism I used to read was the Egyptian criticism that was
Yeah.
being
So
published
who
every
are
week.
some of these? Who are some of the names? Because they'll be new to a lot of people.
Yeah, of course. Samir Farid, he's still my idol when it comes to Egyptian film criticism. Also, Ahmed Saleh used to write in أخبار اليوم. Ali Abu Shadi, Kamal Ramzi. It was an important generation. Like now, I had the chance to know most of them. Some of them passed away. Some of them are still here, and we initiated a continuous discussion, sometimes conflicts regarding how they saw cinema and how they thought about it. But of course, when I was young, I was very impressed by what they do, and it was a different way of seeing things because I love to watch films, and it was only one day every week when you find this page in the daily newspaper that speaks about cinema. It's not a daily thing; it happens only once a week, and it makes you anticipate because they usually publish a film review with all the advertisements of the new films that are
Yeah.
being screened in cinema. And being living in a city far from the capital, so we usually had only the Egyptian films screened in my cinema theaters. But
Yeah.
in the newspaper, they advertise everything. They advertise the American new films that are being shown in Cairo and Alexandria. So it built this relationship. It built an anticipation regarding what I'm going to watch in the coming few months when those films are available on videotapes. The moment I can recall is the moment I decided to initiate my blog. Way before social media, I think it was 2002 or three.
What was the name of the
When I
blog?
realized that there is a new thing called blogging, people can publish their opinions on the social media. At this time, it was the start point of the political blogging scene in Egypt. that built up to the 2011 revolution, but everyone was very, very hard politicized. Everyone is writing about politics, about Mubarak's regime, about corruption, and so. And I was one of the very few people who started a cinema blog. And actually, it was the reason I got my first job offer to write and get paid for writing about films. And it literally changed my life. So
What was the name of the blog?
it was called Cinemania. It's a bit
And
a cliche, but believe me, it was new at this.
was that it was on Blogspot, basically?
Yeah, in Blogspot. Even before they started WordPress. WordPress was a new invention that I couldn't get for a while.
Yeah. I remember my first Blogspot too. It was So did you feel like you were finding an audience? Like, did you feel like, okay, we all have the same, we all used to read these guys who had columns and now this is the new column?
It was, of course, much less than we have today. Like today, when you write an article and you get, I don't know, 20, 25 comments, you feel, okay, it's not doing well. But at the time, it was a very intentional decision that you go to this certain blog that you need to write down the URL to, and you read and you leave a comment. So once you get 2 or 3 comments on a blog post, that means that you have audience. And it started like this, and then social media started softly, high five, then Facebook, the very early versions of Facebook that didn't even have Messenger to communicate with people. And this is the point when I started to join community, when I started to know that it's not a hobby that I'm just doing while practicing my professional life as a pharmacist, but it is a thing that can hold me together with different people. And literally that's what happened. They read my blog post, and they sent me a message and told me we are publishing a magazine called Good News Cinema, and we are hiring new writers. Are you interested to write with us on part-time basis? And it started like this. And I think they published my first not article, it was a feature like about a film in 2007, and that was the first time I became officially a painter.
Okay, I want to talk to you about the term golden age of Arab cinema. When people think about Arab cinema, they think about the 1950s, 1960s, before the governmental sort of takeover of the Nasser's takeover of the cinema industry. Do you think that that's a good title for that age? That is the golden era of Arab cinema?
Well, I think that the sense of nostalgia is always there. Like you will always find people thinking about past as it was better than now. And I even once posted a video of Nouri Sharif speaking within the 80s, which is the decade I prefer the most in the Egyptian film industry, with all the emerging scenes of the new wave, Muhammad Khan, Dawood Abdel Sayed, Atif al-Tayyib, Hayy Sharaf. And at the same moment that we now consider one of the golden moments of the history, the people were all also speaking about golden age and how cinema is not as good as it used to be. So I think it's an urge that is inside us now. You can see all the nostalgic material on media and how people react to it. But if I select a moment of Egyptian film history and I say it can be considered the golden age, I would not say it's before Nasser's regime. I think it is the decade after the Nasser regime.
Really?
It is the starting mid 50s until the state stopped actually funding films at the end of the 60s. So if you go back to all the lists that includes the most important Egyptian films, it happens during the period of state funding films. Of course, the pioneer eras of 30s, 40s, beginning of 50s, it has some good films. And my personal favorite, as I mentioned, is the 80s, the new wave or the new realism cinema that initiated a different way of telling stories in Egyptian films. But when it comes to numbers and when it comes to success and when it comes to having the Egyptian film as a product that can be distributed all around the region, I think it was the 60s mainly.
If you were to put together like a team of like 5, like sort of Avengers, like the Avengers of the Egyptian film industry from those eras, who would make that? Who would make that list?
Only 5?
Let's put 5 to 10. I'll give you up to 10 Avengers.
Okay. I will start with the ultimate Shaheen, of course, because Shaheen is a unique filmmaker. He cannot even fit in any of the generations. You cannot describe him as a 50s or 60s. Like he continued making films until 2006. So he is a massive tycoon in the Egyptian film industry, of course, Yusuf Shaheen. From the generation I believe in, I would say Muhammad Khan, Dawood Abdel Sayed, Khairi Bishara, mainly. From the classics, Salah Abu Saif, he's one of the founding fathers of Egyptian cinema, and also Kamal Sheikh, who was a very, very underrated, important Egyptian film. Who else? Um, Sharif Arafah. Yeah, his most recent films are not that good, but when he started his career in late 80s and throughout the 90s, he was really one of the most impressive and influential Egyptian filmmakers. I think those are my favorites. Maybe I remember someone during the discussion, but I would say those names. Yeah.
Okay. It's funny. I feel like my impression of the music industry, the film industry, had to even like food. Arabs don't like criticism, public criticism. They really don't, right? It's I mean, we can criticize, at least in Lebanon, we love criticizing our politicians. This we can do very blatantly. But writing a bad review of a film where you may or may not know the filmmaker, you may or may not know the actors, the editors, all these people, and writing a review saying, you know, so-and-so's new film, whatever, like Nadine Lebeke's new film is terrible, right? Like masalan, just saying using a random name. And this is why it's terrible. And I feel like this is not something that people are used to in this part of the world.
My experience, I've been doing this for at least 15 years, and I think I'm privileged to know most of the Arab filmmakers on a personal level. The key word you used is the new film. So filmmakers and artists generally are very sensitive when it comes to their most recent work. It makes sense because they invested time, they invested effort, they invested emotions, which is the most important thing in this film. And they are, and when they screen the film for the first time or it's just being released, it's a very vulnerable moment. They need you to assure them that they did it well.
And it's financially vulnerable.
Even emotionally, like even they are a commissioned filmmaker, they just get paid to do this film and they are not being at risk financially, but they are at risk emotionally and artistically. They need the validation. They need you to assure them that it was well made. And when you see it differently and when you think it's not that good, I believe they have the right to not feel good about it. Thinking now after all these years and after all the experiences I have with different filmmakers, I think around the release of the film, it's okay that they don't feel good about it. The most important thing is that you keep your integrity. You speak what you think about the film. You see it. You say it as honest as possible. And later on, most of them, if you are really sincere, if you are really trying to justify every opinion you are doing, if you are disciplined in your language, because that's the thing you gain with time, with years, not to throw big words or humiliate a filmmaker or a film. You just trying to be as disciplined as possible using your language, even if it is aggressive or harsh, but it had to be disciplined. Meaning, when you describe a film or a scene or a performance with a word, you need to explain it. You need to have the justification of using this particular word. I think most of them, I would say 90% of the filmmakers come back 3 or 4 years later and they say, you know what, you had a point speaking about this particular thing in the film, and it wasn't that good as I used to believe. Of course, you will have the 10% who take who stops speaking to you, who think that you are doing this to destroy their careers or whatever. But I think 90% of the cases are being aging well. Like even if it initiated some negative feelings at the beginning, if you prove that you are honest and sincere, it will end up well.
Where do people, like, functionally, what is the life of a critic right now? Because the media industry is collapsing in so many ways. Traditional media is really collapsing. And so journalists are trying to figure themselves out, like, what is the role of a journalist? Who employs journalists? What is their business model? In the Arab world, what is, like, functionally, what is the life of a critic like? Basically, do you have to essentially get associated with film festivals, or do you have to be employed by a newspaper? Or how does it work?
Again, it's not only a problem in the Arab world. I think it's a trend all over the globe. Now I'm managing the federation, which includes at least critics from 80 countries around the world, having all the big film criticism historical schools like French Federation, American Federation, British Federation. They are all members, and we deal with them on a daily basis. And every 5 or 6 years in the federation, we do a big survey. We send a list of questions to more than 1,500 members around the globe, and we ask them certain questions regarding their income sources. What is the percentage of criticism in your income sources? And if it's not the main source, what are the places you are getting paid from, and how you sustain a living? Because when the federation was initiated, we are celebrating now 100 years of FIPRESCI. FIPRESCI was started in 1925, and it was completely different world, of course, you know. And for 70 or 75 years, it was strictly for people who write only film press, and we were not allowed to do any other job, even festival programming, even working in film funds or whatever. But with time and with change in the scene, everyone realized it's practically impossible. Maybe we have 2 or 3% of the members who still can sustain 100% living of being film critics, working for big newspapers who give them a reasonable salary, or even some bloggers now and YouTubers and film reviewers who live out of their content. But this is not the case in big percentage of the members. I think most of the people now needs to do criticism as a job that is accompanied by other activities. You mentioned some of them. We have so many members who are working in festival programming, in festival organization. So many people who works in academia. They teach in universities and film schools. We have people who works for national film funds, or who give consultancy to the industry. But we try to keep it in the FIPRESCI as detached as possible from the industry. So we allow our members to do other activities to sustain living. That's an important thing to highlight, that it is a profession. You need to live out of it, even partially. But of course, we understand that it's becoming more and more for people to gain their living from criticism, especially with the new media, especially with the trend of using influencers and other social media people to promote films. And even in the General Assembly 2 years ago, it was a big discussion regarding what happened in the Barbie premiere. It wasn't a press screening, obviously, because they didn't invite any press. They did a premiere in London, and for the first time in the history of the Critics Society, they didn't invite a single member of our federation, and they just invited influencers, and they gave them some gimmicks or gifts, and they wrote on it, "We are waiting for your positive feedback." And positive was the keynote, because critics are always risk. You can invite them, you can treat them, and they will write negatively about your film. But so they decided only to invite people who can be writing exclusively positively about the film. So it is a challenge, and it is an ongoing change in the scene. What I see, if we are speaking particularly about the Arab world, that most of my peers, most of my colleagues work as film critics / something that is related to criticism, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
academia or festival programming or consultancy.
I'm curious about the what you think about the state of the film industry in the Arab world more broadly. Like, are you optimistic about film coming out of the Arab world? And by film, I'm going to include TV, obviously, because it's all one thing. In 2025, film and TV are basically the same thing. Are you optimistic? Are you? And I'll give you why I'm asking that question. Somebody who's listening might say, like, obviously, he should be optimistic. Like, there's more money being poured into film now than ever. Saudi is opening up, and there's so much interest in the region. But at the same time, there's a lot of top-down energy, and there's a lot of, there's a genocide happening. There is huge amounts of there's a huge amount of political instability and conflict in places that have historically some of the strongest voices. So how do you feel about the state of film and cinema in the Arab world today?
It's difficult because, again, it's a global thing. Of course, we are having our own issues in the region, but the world's not living the best moment historically at all. So I think the feel of risk is over there, wherever you are. If you are speaking with an Arab, with an American, with an European, you'll always see those negative vibes, and people are doubting the future. But I think if we are currently in a world that allows us to speak now, to communicate, and to record this conversation while you are in a country and I'm in a different country, when I manage it somehow to become on the top of this federation that has been run for 98 years exclusively by Europeans and Americans. So there is a change. Maybe it is slow, maybe the opportunities over there is much less that the request over them. But when I see how Arab filmmakers are being represented in the biggest platforms on the globe, when I see the selections of Cannes, Venice, Berlin, the Oscars, or whatever you name it, any big platform, and you see how many Arab films are there, how many artists are being represented and going to tell their stories and speak out loud with the world about their beliefs, about their own narrative, and compare it of what we used to consider golden ages. I think we are living the golden age of representation right now.
Let's talk about film festivals for a second. What is the point of a film festival?
It's a very large question. Like, I think the point of Cannes is different than the point of having a festival in Jeddah and Ritzi or Cairo or Guna. I think the goals are different. Maybe they started with the same target of having a collective screening of films. The idea that started uh, in the very strangest place in fascist Italy in 1932 when they did the first Biennale of Venice, when the idea of gathering people and screening films representing countries initiated by the Mussolini regime. But through the years, and now we are heading to the 1 century of the start of festivals. 7 years from now, we will celebrate a century of film festivals. I think it developed into very different modules. Like, what's the point of making a film festival like Cannes or Venice? It's obvious. It's the exhibition of world cinema. You go to Cannes to watch the new trends of filmmaking, to watch the most recent and most important narratives, and you watch the films that will be the discussion through the coming 8 or 9 that happens every year, and we experience it firsthand. And it is the platform where a new voice and from the Arab world or from wherever is being introduced to the world. And we saw these stories so many times. We saw filmmakers who screened their films, their debut films in a big platform. People started to know them, and we saw how they grow and how they became very influential on the global scene. You mentioned Nadine Labaki. We can remember so many names who started as a beginner filmmaker and now became big names. But if you try to copy Cannes and make it in Beirut or in Dubai or in Cairo, I think that's the recipe of failure, because you will never be Cannes. Even festivals like Rotterdam or Locarno, who are very historical and they have long and extended history, and they are being made in big countries who have big cultural budgets, they fail to acquire the same names or the same titles that Cannes and Venice managed to have. So I think my advice to the Arab film festivals where I work mostly is to find your edge, find why you are doing this particular festival in this particular city at this time of history. So when you organize a festival in a city like Cairo, in a city like Jeddah, in a city like Beirut, a city of millions who are living a very complicated daily life, and they have their own passion regarding films and their own problems and fears. I think you need to tend more to have a community of film lovers. You need to speak to your audience. You need to fulfill their requirements to bring them the films they deserve to watch and they need to watch and they want to watch. And by doing this, you are not being like Cannes at all, because Cannes is an industry exclusive festival. You cannot buy tickets to watch films in Cannes. It's only for accredited industry. But it's not important. You brought the idea of screening films and you integrate it into your local community in the way that will be useful to them.
Okay, so so I agree with you. Cannes and Venice, it doesn't make sense to replicate them, right? Who doesn't make sense to replicate? Or what should we be replicating? Is there an example of another film festival that's really about a local or regional scene that's doing it well? That's like this one, these guys in South Korea, or these guys in Mexico City, or these guys in wherever, they're doing it really, really well. In Austin.
I think I remember so many memories of festivals when I felt it works. It really works. Of course, it is not stable. For example, I think one of the most important experience I had in my whole career was back in 2014, 15, when I started attending Carthage Film Festival in Tunis. It's not the same now. I would say that Carthage now, it's not the same old great festival that it used to be. But at this time, I felt that's the optimum Arab Film Festival, because it was being held in a city with big audience, Tunis. They had sold out screenings. Every little film was sold out. People were fighting to watch a documentary from Kenya or Uganda. They had their officials competition, their competitive part dedicated to the regional films. It is still half Arab. Always the competition of Carthage is half African, half Arab. But at the same time, they had the panorama or non-competitive screenings of the highlights of the global film. So all the films that have been awarded in Cannes or Venice or Toronto or whatever also had their space in the festival, and they had no censorship. The other model that I like, and maybe I'm biased, but Irguna, because I'm working for Irguna for the last 2 editions, but I used to attend it since the beginning. And Irguna, it's a completely different module because Irguna is a privileged reserved. You cannot easily access to Irguna. You need to have a reason to even get from the gates of the city. So if you try to make it an audience festival like Carthage or like Cairo, 100% you will fail because there is no enough audience to fill in the screenings. But what happened in Irguna and what was really smart initiating this festival is they find that this particular place on the Red Sea is a perfect meeting hub. If you want to do an industry event, that's the perfect place. It's a calm, cozy, relaxing place. You can invite important people to be there. They will not be stressed or overwhelmed as they are in Cannes or in Berlin. They will not feel the daily pressures of moving around in a city like Cairo. And you can use their presence for 4 or 5 days to do very important industry meetings. So that's why through the 7 previous editions, Guna became not necessarily the big audience festival, but one of the most important industry hubs. So I think it depends on knowing your cards, knowing what you have, and you try to build your festival accordingly. And again, don't try to imitate or to copy something that is.
So at Guna, for example, if somebody would ask you, Ahmed, 50 years ago, the center of the Arab world's film industry was Cairo. Today, where is the center of the film industry in the Arab world?
I would say culturally it's still Cairo. Financially, it is moving to Riyadh.
Where's the talent coming from?
The talent's coming from everywhere because I'm always against the normal chauvinic Egyptian complex of we are the Arab films. People used to call an Egyptian film an Arab film. Our dialect was easily understandable everywhere. Okay, that was true, but that was because we were the only country that was actually making films. So people, when they want to watch Arab films, they were not comparing an Egyptian film to a Tunisian film or to a Lebanese film or to a Saudi film. Egyptian film was the only option they have to watch an Arab film, and that is a pioneer thing. That is a thing to be admired and respected, of course. But world doesn't go this way. If you advocate for exclusivity, we will not be traveling to the festivals. We will not be selected to big platforms. Where I will not be working with the FIPRESCI. So I am all the way with giving the opportunity for those who deserve it. I'm very happy with the fact that the most important Arab films are coming now. Some here from Morocco, some here from Tunisia, some here from Lebanon. I don't feel any guilt or I don't feel any inferiority regarding this, because at the same time, I know that the Egyptian film industry managed historically until now to sustain its ecosystem, to become the only country in the region that is still able of producing 40 feature films per year, having local films gaining more money in the local box office, in the regional box office, than the American film, a case which is not even applicable to France. In France, American films gain more money than the local ones. So it is a choice that has been taken historically by the Egyptian film industry, and we are living now aftermath, its results. So maybe I have concerns regarding the quality of the films being produced in the mainstream industry in Egypt. Of course, I have concerns regarding censorship and how it becomes more and more complicated if you want to have a courageous narrative that used to happen normally in the films 20 years ago, not a decade, not a century ago. But at the same time, I think everything is changing in a healthy and in a organic way.
In terms of, I mean, as they say in hip hop, cash rules everything around me. So if financially the center is Riyadh, how long do you think it will take for most of the major directors, actors, and infrastructure, editors, talent, grips, everything, set designers, how long until they will almost entirely be based in Riyadh? Or do you expect that not to happen?
I don't think this will happen. Or even if it happens in a way, I don't think that's a negative thing, because our industry is not the same. People work in completely different modules and completely different formulas. For example, you can acquire the mainstream commercial filmmakers to do films in Riyadh. You can bring the best DPs or editors or grips or so to go there. But at the same time, the people that inspires me, the real filmmakers that I support and I follow in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Tunis, in whatever, their asset, their main capital is their culture. They will never go there and make films there. They might go there to do a commission project or so, but they will eventually come back and make a film about Egypt, or make a film about Syria or whatever. So that's one point. Second point is Saudi is a huge demographic place. It's not the same relatively small population like Emirates or like Qatar, or like all the great experience, great efforts made in the Gulf to initiate the film industry. But the fact that there is a country of 40 million people with different cultures, different even beliefs, and they have their own stories. So what's happening now in the last 5-6 years in Saudi is, okay, they are acquiring international talents, but they are also developing local talents, and those local talents will take a big share of their own market, and the opportunities will not be that generous in Saudi soon. The third thing, which is the most important thing, is historically in every place of the world, the art house, the independent, the different, the alternative films are maximum 15 to 20% of any industry, maybe less. United States produce at least 400 films per year, and we end up at the Oscar discussing 7 or 8 or 10 titles, and we even debate about them, and we think this film doesn't deserve to be here. So what I learned through the years and through studying Egyptian film history is the most awful blockbusters that you love to hate their success, was the reason of supporting a smaller independent voice that you love. So films like, I don't know, صعيدي في الجامعة الأمريكية, الليمبي, those massive hits weren't that successful. The same independent, unique filmmakers that was given the opportunity to make their films in the same era will not be there. So, okay, now maybe I'm not that happy of throwing millions doing ولاد رزق ثلاثة and I don't know those blockbusters that costs $25 million to do a film. But at the same time, I think that's the only reason that the Red Sea Fund is supporting original voices from Egypt, from Africa, from Asia, from the Arab world, and we can see the pipeline of films coming out from the Red Sea Fund and the Red Sea Lodge, and from the DFI in Doha, and from the different funds. So I think it's all positive. Maybe it's not my taste of films. Maybe it's not the films I prefer to go and watch and support. But it is essential having films costing millions and bringing hundreds of millions from the box office. It's the only way to finance smaller ones.
Okay, last question before we move on to the rapid fire stuff. Censorship is something that people think about and worry about in every single field of expression, whether it's journalism, writing, right now in the States, academic freedom, and film is no different. What markets do you think are have the least amount of censorship right now across the Arab world? And do you feel like this is changing? And maybe do you feel like this is just an overblown problem? Like this is a very Western question that somebody would ask.
What I think what happened in the last 2 years proved that there is censorship everywhere. In the most liberal and anarchist culture around the world, you will see topics that you cannot tackle. You can see words that you cannot mention, and we see what happens now in Germany, for example, which is like theoretically one of the most liberal countries in the world. So the inferiority of us thinking about ourselves like we are the people coming from dictatorship countries, from the oppressed societies, and we need to deal with the censorship and fight with the censorship. I don't go this way. I don't believe this should be our narrative. At the same time, I understand that there is a big challenge regarding our freedom. No one can really censor your voice. You can always have a way to speak out and say what you want, but some institutions can hinder you of making it your profession. Like you can speak, but you cannot monetize on it. You cannot do a film and release it commercially. And I think it's a continuous struggle. It is there, especially in Egypt, for example. I believe that what happened in the last few years was very difficult regarding censorship. Some films that were made in the beginning of the century and even 10 years ago are very difficult to get permissions to do right now the same film. But I think that's all temporary. So it is somehow a Western question, because now if you are Western and you raise this question, please look back at your country and ask yourself, am I really free to say anything, or I'm just trying to manifest it? But at the same time, it's a battle that we should take, and we should fight for our freedom of speech. We should fight collectively to support filmmakers to do what they want to do. And I don't know. I'm always optimistic. Unfortunately, I'm always optimistic.
Yeah. Deb, let's do this rapid fire, and then we'll wrap up. Favorite Egyptian film of all time?
I'll pick one. Al-Harith by Muhammad, the street play, 1984.
Most underrated Arab director?
It's difficult. Like, when it comes to Egyptian film industry, I would say Kamal Sheikh, who used to be neglected by the leftist criticism because he was not that into their political beliefs, but he's really a brilliant filmmaker, Kamal Sheikh.
A film that changed the way you think about cinema.
Yeah, that's also an easy choice because I spoke about it recently. It was Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick. But that was a personal story because the film came out in 1999. At the time, I was in high school in my city, in Tanta. I feel like this was never a material that can be screened there. You know the film, and it is very graphic in a way. And we used to hear about it. We read news about it. The last film, a filmmaker, we even didn't know that Kubrick was that big, but a filmmaker did it and died before finishing it. It's the last film that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman made it before getting divorced. We waited for it, and someone managed to bring it on a videotape. Yeah. And someone brought a videotape from outside, and it eventually came to my group of friends. And of course, it wasn't translated, and it's a very complicated film to follow. And you need to find proper condition to watch it without being attacked by your family and thinking you're watching a porn film or something like this. But
Yeah.
the end thing is, I watched the film when I was 10 years old, and I understood nothing. It was okay. Why all the hype regarding this film? Okay. And then 15 years later, or maybe more, I decided to rewatch it again after I became a father, after I have a family, I have a wife, and I realized that it is not only a deep and philosophical film, but it is scary. It's one of the most scary films because it questions all the fundamental beliefs that you think that they are not changeable. The institution of family, the trust and relationship between partners, that everything that you think it is not touchable, it can really be sabotaged on a single moment, on a single minute of desire. So I think this moment made me reevaluate so many things, reevaluate films that you watch in a younger stage of your life. And I think if we go back to our memories, we all will find such films that we used to love and we advocate for, and we thought that those are the masterpieces. And then if you go back to watch them 20 years later, you realize how fragile they were, but you was fragile as well. And the opposite, films that you didn't get at the moment and you kept yourself away from, and suddenly realized that you just weren't ready enough for those films. So it's hard discovery because it means that you need to go back and watch all the films you watched in a younger age and reevaluate them. But I think it is my choice with the question.
It's funny that you chose this because I was having an argument with a friend that 1999 was the best year for like a male film fan to be in high school.
American Beauty,
Fight Club, The Matrix, American Beauty, Eyes Wide Shut, The Sixth Sense, Election, Being John Malkovich, Man on the Moon, Magnolia. There's just like insane number of films that came out that year.
That's the golden age actually, when Hollywood was very ready to finance author filmmakers to do their narratives. Now it's very difficult for such filmmakers to do such films.
Okay, let's keep on going. For a first-time attendee of a film festival, what is the best film festival for them to attend?
My evergreen choice would be Cannes, because Cannes is not a single festival. Like every person in Cannes will have his own personal experience. Like if you want to go there to watch films, then the most important and recent films, you will go there. If you want to go through the red carpet and see the glamorous stars, you can do it if you can afford it. If you just go to chill and being around beaches and bars and so. So I think Cannes is my pick.
Okay. Favorite film critic of all time?
Arab critics, I mentioned Samir Farid. Stays my favorite Arab film critic, and also Brahim Laris. Yeah, he's very very important and influential. Western critics, I used to love Michel Simon. I read him mostly translated to English, but he had a very unique way of watching cinema. Uh, Contemporary, I may advise people to read what Peter Bradshaw is writing for The Guardian. He's my favorite contemporary.
What's harder, writing a review of a film you loved or a film you hated?
A film you loved.
Really?
I think a film you hate, the writing process starts within watching films. The film you start realizing the weakness or the points you want to raise in your review. Yeah, your mind starts actually putting headlines within watching the films, because you realize that's the problem, that's the thing I want to highlight, that's the thing I didn't like about the film. But great films get you immersed, get you involved, emotionally attached, and sometimes stops your logical way of thinking. If the film is amazing, you find yourself drawing into the wave, and suddenly you realize that you need to review this film and you need to factualize and analyze your relationship with it. So of course, writing about like a great film is much difficult than writing about a bad.
Okay. 3 last ones real quick. A country in the Arab world with the most underrated filmmakers.
Underrated, no. But I think I really like the talents coming from Tunisia. Tunisia is a country that is continually surprising us with unique narratives.
The next film
And
from
Palestine recently, to be honest, Palestinian films recently are also very surprising.
Amazing. The next film or filmmaker from the region that you're most excited about.
I'm really curious to know how the people will deal with Murad Mustafa's film that will be screened in Cannes. Maybe when you screen this episode, the film will be screened, because Cannes is happening within 2 weeks. Murad has a very impressive career of doing short films, and now he just finished his debut feature called Aisha Can't Fly Away, and it was selected to Un Certain Regard in Cannes. So, and it is an edgy film. It's not an easy film to watch. I luckily watched it in editing, so I'm really anticipating what the world will deal with the talent of Murad Mustafa.
Amazing. Ahmed, thanks so much. Where can people find you or find more information about the work you're doing?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page called The Film Observer, where I upload my articles. But if you want to follow the articles, mainly on 2 websites, filfan.com, an Egyptian film website, and Fasla, which is a new website founded 15 months ago in Saudi Arabia. I was one of the founders. And I really advise people to go to see fasla.com. It's a very nice outlet for people who love cinema. And I have my social media accounts all under the same handle, Ciao for Life.
All right, Ahmed, thanks so much, man. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you so much.